Hello, welcome back to the Limelight. I'm Craig Hewitt from Castos, and on the show today I have Raj from PhotoCountry. Raj, how's it going?
Oh, awesome. Thanks for the invite. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, and it's great to have you here. And I think like folks who have listened to other or watched other episodes of Limelight, the goal here is we want to get to know you and your podcast and kind of where you are in the journey. And I think that's a really great place to start. So do you mind sharing with folks kind of a bit about you and your podcast?
Yeah, so PhotoCountry is a show where I talk to other photographers. I'm a photographer myself. I mean, I'm not a full-time photographer, but like a sort of a semi-pro. It's more than a hobby and probably a little less than a pro photographer. I mean, the only difference probably between me and a pro photographer is I don't charge. A pro photographer will probably charge. So in terms of the quality, it's probably the same. So, but it's more of a passion project. And the way, so what I do here is it's basically it's what I wanted to do, talk to other photographers, and I just converted that into a show. And the way it started was before the pandemic. There was this notice that I saw on a community board saying, inviting people to come and have if they had an idea for a radio show at a community radio station, create a pitch for it. So I never thought about podcasting or radio before. Like, I was just a photographer creating content. I love writing. I loved going out taking photographs. So I just pitched a show on photography, and I loved country music, so I had to play some music, right? So as I wanted to play country music,
the name makes sense now.
Yeah. So I went there and the producer said, "What do you want to call it? Like, what kind of music you want to play?" I said, "Country music." "Okay, let's call it PhotoCountry." I was like, boom, that's how it started. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So then, it was every Friday. So I used to talk about photography. Then I used to, record some interviews and then play excerpts from that interview in between songs. So that's how it started. And then COVID hit, and the whole thing went down the drain. So, but I had all this interviews, and the producer said, "Hey, why don't you pivot this and convert it into a podcast and keep doing what you're doing?" So that's how PhotoCountry with Rajeev was born, actually. So now it's 35 episodes old. And because PhotoCountry is a great name as like a brand, so I, along with a friend of mine, now we're just converting that into a digital brand and creating an online magazine out of it as well.
Oh, wow.
So
that's
it's
awesome.
photocountry.co is a magazine we just started online. It was a blog of mine. It was just my photographs. But then I thought, okay, why don't we just pivot this and turn it into a blog and get other writers to write on it? So now from there, it's now grown to a magazine now.
That's awesome. I love hearing these stories of like, because of my podcast X, and because of my podcast, I've been able to quit my job or, meet someone special or start a magazine. That's super cool. I think we've heard a couple other stories of folks who the podcast was the very tip of this journey that they're on. That they're going to do all sorts of interesting things now. So that's really cool to hear. Yeah. So in 35 or so episodes, like, what's the biggest learning lesson you've had so far?
In terms of production, like how to ask questions, because essentially it's the shows is like an artist profile. I don't get into what camera do you use, what lens do you use, and there is my biggest grouse against the internet is they've converted photography into this gear thing, But it really doesn't matter what.
Same with podcasting.
It doesn't really matter what mic do you use or what editing software you use. If it's a bad show, right?
Yeah.
So it's similar to photography. So I really didn't want to focus on the camera or the gear, but rather on the person, because the photographer takes a photograph. not the camera, right? So I wanted to focus on the art and poetry of photography rather than the technology or the thing behind it. So it's more about, what's your story? How did you get started in photography? And, what are your takeaways from it? So it's a really like a short 20 to 30 minute showcase of an artist. That's what I want to do. And just as an inspiration for the photographer, because essentially that's the journey that I am in. And I want to learn from these guys so essentially it's just me, and I really don't care if nobody listens, right? So, I mean, it helps if other people listen, but it's me. It's my passion. I want to improve. So I would like to talk to other people. So it's just an extension of what I want to do. So, and I love photography, and I'm sure there are other people who love photography and love to listen to other photographers talk about their craft. So, so it's just like a passion project, and hopefully it will, if I keep doing it, people will come, So just like the Kevin Costner movie, you build it, they will come.
Field of Dreams. Yeah. Well, it sounds familiar to my journey with this show, right? Like the whole origin story of this is like, I just wanted to have interesting conversations with people that are podcasting and learn, right? Like I've been in this business for 8 years, and still like I want to be learning all day, every day. And the best way to learn is talking to folks like you, right? Who are in it, especially early on, learning new things and finding their way in the journey. So I think it's great. And I think it's the whole purpose of this show, right? Is like extract these little lessons, share them with folks so that we all can learn together. So kudos to you. I think we're kindred spirits. That's awesome. So like, I'd love to hear, I like to say, like, what is something that makes you so exceptional? Like what is something that you're super proud of that like you want to share with folks?
Just the variety of photographers that are on the show. I'm really not focused on just the famous names. There are, it's not about the number of followers that you have on Instagram. There are people who don't have many followers, and the type of photography that they do. Like, for example, I have a guy who does solar can photography. He just takes a used beer can, punches a hole in it, puts a film in it, and ties it up on a tree and leaves it for 6 months. And and it's essentially you're co-creating with nature a piece of art. It captures the movement of the sun over 6 months. And it's exposed to the natural elements of water, moisture, rain, etc. And all of this put together creates a piece of art, and you're basically co-creating with nature a piece of art, which is like fantastic. And I really didn't know that until I stumbled upon this guy.
Yeah.
So you get to know people like, and there's another guy who I interviewed who actually does street photography with a 4x8, those huge 4x8 cameras with a with a plate, and you put a sheet over. You remember that?
Old school, for sure.
He does that, and he does street photography. So there are just, the variety is just amazing, and and there's another guy who's a world-class cliff diving photographer with Red Bull, and he's from New Zealand. So there's so much variety there. And I'm not focused on the big names. I just want people who love their art and producing really amazing work in their own unique way. So that's the key here. It's not just professional photographers, but also amateur street photographers. So I've got people from Santiago, Chile to Christchurch, New Zealand, and everywhere in between.
That was one of my questions. I know you're in New Zealand, and I was wondering if you only are interviewing local folks or if it's like an international kind of show.
Yeah, so I have local folks on the show, especially in New Zealand. There's a very tight film community, film photographers, And it's a feature a lot of film photographers as well, because film is, I think, right now is seeing a renaissance of sorts, and that's really interesting.
Yeah. Have you found it difficult to find those interesting artists and the stories that you want to tell? Like 35 episodes in, like, are you starting to kind of hit that wall of people that you know, and do you have a way to find new interesting people, or what's that look like?
I mean, there's so many that I want to talk to. I don't think I have a issue with finding people. It's just them saying yes, some or a bit shy. In a lot of people I have to chase for many months to to convince them to come on the show. So, but usually what happens is every guest I speak to, they have a recommendation, or they'll know somebody who'll say, hey, this guy will be a great fit for your show. And that's how the chain keeps going.
That's great. I love that. For folks who are just looking to get started in podcasting, right? So like you're a photographer, you're in the arts, but relatively new to podcasting. What's like one piece of advice you would give someone who's just getting started with this that like you could help them take the shortcut to the point you're at?
It's one thing I would say is don't worry about finding the right gear. Oh, I need to have this. Oh, I need to have that. Otherwise, I can't get started with. Start with what you have. Especially the same thing I say with photography. The best camera is that camera that you have, which happens to be a mobile phone camera. And in fact, I just finished a workshop on mobile photography yesterday. So I specialize in that. I give workshops and so it doesn't really matter. You have a legit creative device right in your pocket. So get started with your mobile phone and start taking photographs. Don't wait to buy the next big thing that's in the market. That's not going to better your photography. It's you that you need to become better, not the device can always change, right? Same with podcasting. Because when I started off, I didn't have a mic. I didn't have this thing. I started with Zoom. And I started editing on, I think Adobe Audition. And I also used... DaVinci Resolve, which is free, and it has a free audio editing plugin there with Resolve, and it's great. So that's how I started. Before, of course, and then I started, and even the mic that I use is less than $50, and it's nothing special. You don't have to have like a fancy gear, and so I don't think the one thing I would say is get started with what you have. Don't worry about getting the special expensive gear that's not going to do more episodes, get better at it. Then when you hit a wall saying, oh, I cannot get any more with what I have, I need to get a step up, I think that's when you need to invest in something.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think there's a lot of folks in the podcasting industry that come from music, and they're super opinionated and concerned with the exact quality of every sound bit that happens. And I think at a point that's really, really, really important, if you're NPR or public radio or at that caliber. But I think for most folks, especially if you're just getting started, much more the important thing is just sticking with it. And when you get to 100 episodes, then let's worry about that, right? But for the first 100 episodes, let's just record. Today, I'm the same way. This is an $80 microphone. And I've done a whole bunch of podcasts on this and its predecessor that was $100 maybe, but in 8 years I've spent $150 on podcast microphones and done about 500 episodes, and it's still working. So I agree. I agree. Awesome. So it sounds like PhotoCountry.co is where the website is if folks want to check out the podcast and learn more about what you're up to.
Absolutely.
Yep. Awesome. Raj, thanks so much for coming on the Limelight. I appreciate it.
Great. Awesome. Big fan of Audience. Learned a lot from that show.
Awesome. That's really cool. Thank you. I'll pass that on to the team. Very cool.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me on the show.